Welcome to the stage one more time for the final keynote event, Dr. Ruben Armour-Singham.
Fantastic. Well, we're finally here. We're here to talk about our new product. Incredibly excited to reveal what we have in store. And it was fascinating listening to the two panels. I thought were outstanding. More hours. But there was a lot of material in there that is going to resonate with this work. So I think I saw that of the 3 or 4 items that people would say they'd be interested in seeing move forward as kind of the next set of AI, there was a lot of discussion around the progress note, the medical progress note, which makes a lot of sense for a variety of reasons. The progress note has been a staple of modern medicine, of American healthcare. It's involved with billing, so if you can actually get the progress note right, you can have a direct bottom line ROI impact for health systems, which is obviously really critical. That was in the ROI panel. You're saving time for physicians. A really well-written progress note from scratch is going to be a well-written one. Could be 15 minutes to 18 minutes, depending on how experienced you are. If it's a patient you're familiar with, 7 to 8 minutes. You could be leaving money on the table, as I talked about, with diagnoses that you're not capturing. And then there's the quality element. You have other staff services looking at the progress note. You have the fact that that's the progress note of record that patients and families are increasingly getting access to. I think it was pointed out that if you're repeating elements from prior days in that's really not a good look. And then there's the legal aspects, right? So I love the discussion on liability, because imagine that you're taking care of a patient, you copy and paste something, you forget to or miss a section that you needed to edit, and then something goes wrong. And it's now in a court, right? And you have a copy and paste. Doesn't matter, you can't say that I copy and pasted it, right? That's a serious issue. So, I wanted to, this is not working for me, sorry. I don't know if there's there we go. Okay, you guys are going to do it. So I want to talk about the progress note. I think you can kind of see where some of this is going. But to really understand, and I think somebody talked about, can you remove the progress note altogether? Okay, that's going a little too far. But I think that, but that's an interesting question. Is the progress note going to fundamentally change in the era of AI? But I know there's a lot of non-physician members and clinicians, people that are just, looking at healthcare from the outside. So I want to talk about the progress note because it's something that I've studied for a long time and I think is an incredible form of communication if you just boil it down to what it's doing. So, this starts in 1892. Now, the 1892 is a really interesting time to start this. One, because pieces actually came out of Parkland Hospital. I don't know if you know, Parkland Hospital was founded in 1894. Just think about that. And now, work that we did at Parkland is I think, moving across the country. Prior to 1890, there was no medical record. Healthcare and medicine was essentially a trade craft, an apprenticeship, and you could know exactly where someone apprenticed by how they practiced, because there was a Chicago style, there was a Boston style, there was a Dallas style, to the extent that there was a Dallas style. There was different styles, but there was no systematized way. And in 1892, someone that I've really come to admire, Sir William Osler, published the Principles and Practice of Medicine. Now, this is a really interesting guy. If you have a chance to ever read about him, I'm an amateur biographer of Osler. I have 6 books on him at home because he really is the founder of American modern medicine. And if I could invite somebody to the dinner table that's deceased, that I want to talk to, he'd be the guy. He basically said the way that we're approaching medicine, of this just non-systematic, non-observation style medicine doesn't work. And he recommended and championed over time the idea of the systematic observation of a patient on a daily basis, particularly on the inpatient side, but also on the ambulatory side, the systematic daily observation that are accompanied by notes. And he said when you do that, you actually learn as a physician what's actually changing. So you write the note every day, in a sense, to instruct yourself what actually is happening with the skin, with the cardiac system, with all that. And he wrote this incredible masterpiece that for 50 years was the main medical treatise, which is the Principles and Practice of Medicine. That started the idea that you got to have this kind of notation. One of the things that's important about it is he believed that if you don't go through this process, you can't take ownership of the patient. And one of the questions that we have with AI is that as AI gets more involved, would you potentially have physicians that are taking less ownership of the patient from an intellectual, cognitive standpoint? But Osler, amazing guy. He was also a crazy guy. And you can't tell from this picture, he was a total prankster. He pulled pranks on everybody, including pranks in the morgue and, and dead bodies. So a really interesting guy, but also an incredible, and he was also the founder of Johns Hopkins, just did a lot of great stuff. So that was William Osler, and we started to begin the beginning of some of these kind of documentation. Nothing really happened. I mean, from that point on, it was still till 1950. And essentially what started happening is people across the United States, medical schools started forming, but there was no systematized approach to these observations. So you'd see, okay, let's write something down. You'd fill things up, and there was no, you couldn't go from one place to another and get a systematic way to understand what was happening with the patient. And then, therefore, you'd have a lot of variability. And the quality improvement circles, all of us that are involved with quality and safety, were very focused on removing variation where possible. That has its own excesses, but when you're trying to remove variation, there was complete variation in terms of how these hospital charts and notes were written. So in 1950, a guy by the name of Lawrence Weed, incredible physician as well, and he said, we need to have a structure to the progress note. We should call it a daily progress note that forms a particular structure. And if you do that structure, the note itself will kind of guide you as to how to take the patient. And he wrote a seminal paper in 1968 called Medical Records That Guide and Teach. So just to reflect that on that moment, right? He said the biggest reason to create a progress note in a medical record is to actually guide the person, the doctor and others, to do it. You can just imagine where we are now at progress, which is the exact opposite. A well-written progress note helps the practitioner think through systematically the various organs, the construction of the diagnosis, all those elements. And so he wrote this amazing paper. Talk about adoption. He wrote this concept of doing a progress note, and within 2 years, it was standard across the United States. Like, we talk about how difficult it is to adopt. Imagine, people were yearning for some sort of structure. So he's an amazing guy. He also was the first to suggest that there could be something like a computer record, and that was back in 1968. So one of the things that emerged out of the progress note that he talked about was, you can see from 1968 to kind of 1975, was this idea of a particular type of progress note, which every clinician in the room will recognize is a SOAP note, subjective, objective assessment plan. So when you see a patient, you should say, hey, what are they telling me about how they're doing? The objective would be, what are the specific objective physical and physical findings that I can say about the patient? What are the objective laboratory and vital sign data? And then the assessment, which is, to me, the best part of the entire SOAP note. It's basically a summary of what's happening to the patient. So quick insight here, when we trained pieces to build a summary, it was based on model the way that doctors well-written assessments in a progress note. And so it's really written the same way. And the assessment is really an incredible marvel, I think, of clinical writing, if it's done really well. It's meant to say, no matter how complex the case is, no matter how many years the situation is going on, you got to distill it in less than 100 to 150 words, a well-written assessment. And then the plan section, which is you've written that assessment, so now tell me by problem or by organ system what is my plan, including any kind of contingent factors, which is really a lot of potential if-then statements and saying what might happen. So this was a SOAP note, and this really is the modern progress note. There's different formulations of it. There's APSO, which is you do the assessment plan, and SO afterwards. That's because of the EMR, because the most important section is in many cases for the assessment plan. So there was this beautiful I think almost, of a high literature of what this progress note is to be. And the thesis was that if you do this on a daily basis, the patient and the situation tell you what's going on without all of the kind of modern technology that you have. So that was 1968, massive, rapid adoption, which was incredible. Now, in 1980, we had, and I think this was highlighted in the panel, so I'm actually kind of just repeating what people said. You had the beginning of managed care and cost containment, and people were like, okay, should we really be paying these people for what they're saying that they're doing for the patient? How are we going to really know? Let's see, where can we figure it out? Oh, the progress note. Let's find out, you got to start put billing codes in the progress note. Let's start saying, okay, I'm only going to pay you if you put this in your progress note. But immediately the progress note started diverging from its original purpose. Now it's like, you got to put billing codes in there, and you got to make sure that your conditions are something that you could justify. And sometimes you may not be sure. The right progress note can put some level of ambiguity, but with the billing codes, you have to really force yourself on some ways that you might not want to. Then 1990, you had the transition to the electronic health record, the massive beginning of digitization of the health record across the United States. And one thing about the EMR is that we started to find that this was a promised to be improved quality and safety and a lot of things, but really it was an incredible financial investment. And as many people have said today, it really, in some cases, you could say that we haven't really got the full ROI, but we digitized the American medical record, and it creates the substrate for AI. We could not do artificial intelligence without that infrastructure of data. But when you had the EMR, you had a lot of bad habits come into the progress note and into documentation in general. You've heard the term note bloat. So we started getting Hamlet-size medical records. People would say, hey, from day to day, instead of carefully thinking about maybe what's happening to the patient, you're just copying and pasting the information. You have billing codes coming in. You have all these other people coming in and manipulating and misfiguring the note so that it's not even really close to the original purpose of the note. And then we fast forward to 2023, and this is kind of where we are. So now we get to 2023, and Pieces has developed 1 million kind of working summaries, which we are saying is the same as the assessment section of the progress note. So to create that summary, I mentioned earlier, the system has to be able to comprehend the patient. So it has to really know everything that's happening. So to be able to do that, it's the same thing that would be needed for a progress note. If you can really comprehend everything that's happening to the patient, you really are comprehending what's happening on an interval basis to the patient. So the question now is, what happens in 2024? So I'm really excited to announce that Pieces has created a fully automated, fully comprehensive inpatient progress note. It's super exciting. So this has taken a really long time to do. This has been probably 4 to 5 years in many cases. We had to nail the summary to get it right, but that infrastructure engine that we talked about to create the summary is coming here. There was some great conversation about, in some of the panels about is the ROI, how do you prove the ROI for summary? I think it's great. It could really save a lot of time and communication, but the ROI for the progress note is awesome. Let me just talk to you about the progress note. Why is there ROI? One is if the progress note's really working, it should be able to capture diagnoses that the doctors are talking about or treating, but perhaps have not written about. And when you think about some of those cases, you can talk about 1 to 2% increases in DRG payments, which may seem like a small percentage, but if you're getting those minor conditions in the note, you could dramatically improve the situation. Second is a fully automated note will help reduce copy-paste error because it's saying, hey, this was already mentioned, what's the new information that's happening, bring it forward. So that's liability risk going down, and that's also saving the time. And then the third is that there's just the pure savings of time. So to me, this was like people talk about the triple aim of healthcare. To me, this was the triple aim of ROI, saving doctors time, improving billing, and reducing legal liability, all in one solution. So let's talk about the pieces of work in progress now. So the first thing is that we have really taken a long time to think about this. You have to try to build it in a way that, that the doctor is still the owner of this note, right? That they're not kind of doing any intellectual shortcuts and that they're really focused on it. So the way Pieces works is it will not write your note for you if you haven't written the first note. You have to write the first note. And the reason is, one is because when you do that origin note, as we call it, you've kind of understand what's happening with the patient. You set up the note that you want. You also write the note that you want. Even with the standardization of the note, there are different elements. And if it has, if it meets the criteria index for Pieces, Pieces will generate your subsequent notes. And so what does that do? So because you wrote the first note, Pieces will mirror your style of how you're writing the note on subsequent notes. So if you're a neurosurgeon, you're going to write it a certain way with certain acronyms. It's going to follow that. If it's an internist, it's going to follow the same approach. Why is that important? So it can immediately have generalizability right away. The second thing is that when we've worked with and talked with a lot of doctors, focus groups, trying to think through it, it's amazing what can cause cognitive strain. So let's say that a doctor wrote a note one way, and let's say on a scale of 1 to 100, the note is about 85. And let's say that Pieces decided to write another note that on a scale of 1 to 100, in terms of quality, is a 99. But it's a different style. When the doctor goes to the note with the 99, it's a lot of brain damage to try to figure out how my note compares to that. They'd rather have their note at 85 rewritten in their style so they can immediately have that cognitive experience. We were like really amazed by how quick they can immediately, if it was written in their style, they can, this is what I want to say. Now, this is where we're going to want to work with health systems because you can really constrain it, right? You could say Pieces, I don't like that style. We want to have these styles with these elements, right? And that's definitely not a Pieces decision, right? That's health system governance, clinical governance, change management, as people talked about. Personally, I think it's better to be organic, but that's just my approach. That's not the Pieces decision. But the point for Pieces is we want to set up a substrate where it's going to be up to the health system to decide with their physician workforce. That's the first part. The second part is we want to do inline changes. And so you'll be able to see this in the demo room. I'm just showing examples of this. So the way Pieces works is you come in on a Wednesday, you write your first note. On Thursday, you come in. Pieces will not just not only will it not, it needs that origin note, it won't rewrite your note. It tries to keep as much of your original note as possible, but it was brought up. Let's say that on Monday, you saw the patient. Over the next 24 hours, 3 lab tests were done. There was a consult that was placed. You're waiting on an echocardiogram. Somebody was saying that echocardiograms are ordered all over the place. You've got a skilled nursing facility placement that you're waiting for. Pieces will know what's happened in the last 24 hours and lightly place that in the note. And it'll try to put it in. You can see example. For example, this person said there's a goal net negative diuresis of 1.5 to 2 liters per day. And Pieces goes in and looks and says there was a net negative 1.8 overnight. Do you want to accept that? And you can write it in. So the goal is to allow for incremental changes, but it will also clean up. So for example, a common one that we mention is you can have someone on medications and you stopped a medication, particularly let's say an IV inotropic medication, you stopped it and you started a new medication, but you may not have changed your note when you copy pasted it. You didn't necessarily change it. Pieces will go in and suggest that, hey, the dobutamine was stopped, because of this reason, and then you can accept it. So the last part I'll talk about is the concept of diagnosis capture. So, it's been interesting to talk to different health systems. There's different approaches that I think health systems could use in bringing this forward. An incremental approach would be to say, I want to just start with the narrow component and not do the whole progress note. One area of exploration is just to do the diagnoses that you didn't mention. This has huge billing impacts because, and the doctors don't have a lot of time. There's no problem with the conditions that are top of mind. Active conditions, usually those are handled really well. But other conditions that are more minor that can turn the DRG pretty significantly can be forgotten because you're moving so fast, you may not mention it. And here's what happens. They don't mention it, then you get a CDI, a clinical documentation improvement inquiry 3 days later. You don't know what's going on with the patient. There's a lot of challenges. You don't have the time to go back in the record. So this causes a lot of irritation. Imagine if you could get it up front. I treated this patient. They should be listed as class 2 obesity. I gave this person potassium because of hypokalemia, hypomagnesemia. So one option that we're creating is you could just start with this. The other approach is to start with the kind of the entire progress note. Now, I was just talking to Brett, afterwards, I think on this debate of physician productivity, I do think that when you think about satisfaction, I think if you have a proper assistant, like I would rather do more work if I had a great assistant, right? I wouldn't mind, because I love the flow of the work. It's like, okay, I'm top of license. These little things like the hypomagnesemia, yeah, of course I treated it, but an intern would have written that in. This is what Pieces is doing, is trying to allow you. One of the things we have to be careful, and we're going to think about this as a community that's working on AI, is how do you make sure that people are not checking their brains out when, with these AI systems? But I think what will happen is people will get more in flow. We talk about in other industries about the state of flow. We've been thinking about that a lot for doctors, nurses, and case managers. What creates flow? It's not necessarily seeing more patients. Seeing more patients is great if you're in flow. You're like, okay, I just earned this RBU benefit. Not to mention that's very commercial. They're just like they want to do a good job. That most clinicians tell us they want the tools to do a great job. So if these lower level tasks are taken care of, that becomes important. And why is the progress note important? I think the progress note is still an incredibly important piece of the record that needs to be maintained, because we're going to see a future, in my view, where the progress note becomes the blueprint that an AI system can follow. When I write something in the note and say, this is what I'm concerned about, this is what I want to follow, now an AI system is sole task is to figure out, is this happening? Give me this information. I don't think we have to go to full agency, but it could be like, I'm concerned about it. And when that creates a virtuous cycle, because I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a little bit more time on this note because I'm going to have an AI that's going to be looking for it. And you're creating this virtuous cycle between a good note writing to an AI assistance, back to good note writing, and overall better care for the patient. So in building on what William Osler started and continue to bring it into the modern age of the progress note as programming code is how we're kind of looking at pieces. The programmer is the physician. The AI is the executor of that, right? And you can see how that goes. So we're incredibly excited about this. So that's the Pieces progress note. We're super excited. So for all, yeah, it's awesome. For all of our clients that are enterprise-wide, that's the really exciting part is there's no additional cost. We've been working with our partners. We see a lot of different strategies about how people are implementing this. And a lot of people are very volume-based approaches to computation. We think that there needs to be an obligation on Pieces to continue to innovate, work with our partners like AWS, get those costs down so that when you work with Pieces, you can pick the speed at which you're going to deploy these products. Because when we think about health systems, there's a lot of challenges of deploying. People get excited and they lose excitement. You have different committees involved. There's a pace, and sometimes you accelerate, decelerate. But we don't want that to be based on a volume percentage. We want more and more engagement, more and more use of Pieces, regardless of where you are. So that's been really important. But that's not all. We have one more piece to talk about here. So when we think this is a big step change to get the progress note. It's hard to really talk about it. I've been really close to it, but it took us forever to get the summary right. It's been less generations to get the progress note, and we're very excited about it. And I just want to say the foundation of the progress note, before I move to the next one, lays open a lot of other possibilities, including the discharge summary, which is our next one after the progress note. So then you have the triple hit of the summary, the progress note, the discharge summary. The discharge summary, a good, well-written discharge summary, can be 45 minutes to 60 minutes if you're doing it really well. Now, there's a lot of different variation on it, but let's say an amazing discharge summary of a really complex long-stay patient, right? But that's just the basis of where you take summary, progress note, discharge summary, consultant notes. All of that are a family of AI-driven assistants that can do that. But when I showed you that cube earlier on about the healthcare landscape and where AI can change, one of the axes was modality. So the modalities that PIECE is currently using is primarily reading the electronic record. But there's been a lot of progress in ambient technology. We're not the first ones to get into it. There's been a lot of people working on ambient listening for healthcare. And most of the groups that are working on it is doing something that I think is really important, but it's kind of a narrow area. They basically say, let's listen to the conversation between the doctor and the patient. Let's record that whole conversation. Let's essentially transcribe it and then create it into a note, right? I think it's very valuable. But I think one of the things about that is you're writing that note in the absence of any understanding of the full context of the patient. When you're in a 45-minute conversation with the patient, you may not be able to say everything that you're actually thinking in that conversation. And there's a lot of, the tone and being able to get everything correct of, I was saying one thing to the patient, but that wasn't necessarily what I was thinking. So I still have to do a lot of bit of editing when I come to the note. But I think there's no question this is here to stay and very important part of the arsenal. But PIECE has decided to look at ambient listening a little bit differently. When we've talked to physicians and others, they're like, I want an assistant. We just heard this from a lot of people in the room. And in the inpatient setting, let's start with inpatient first. When you talk about going to see a patient in a hospital room in the inpatient side, you don't really have a 15-minute conversation with the patient. The patient many times may not be able to talk to you even, right? Or they're pretty sick, especially in modern medicine. Hospital care means more sick patients. You're not going to have a long conversation. They're very brief encounters, but you are doing very important information in that encounter. What people would want to do is they pull out their phone and say, hey, I just saw the patient at 562. The cellulitis looks like it's getting worse. I'm going to probably move it up to IV antibiotics. Let's start cefepime. Blood pressure is improving, so let's drop the lisinopril. Some conversation like that. It literally takes 2 minutes. Make sure that's in my note, right? Let me move on to my next patient. When I think about case management, we've worked on the concept of discharge barriers for a long time. It's one of the most challenging and difficult problems. Why is discharge barriers so hard? Because discharge barriers are totally different. It's based on the eye of the beholder, right? If someone's trying to focus on what needs to happen for this patient, they know what the next steps are. They may not put that in their record. There might be an evolution of the case. But you can imagine a case manager talking to an assistant saying, hey, I'm going to take care of the skilled nursing facility, and this is what I heard from them. And the biggest thing right now is I got to make sure that DME comes in, and these other barriers we're taking care of, and make sure that's in my note, that's in my thing. So what people have kind of asked for, what people want, and on the ambulatory side, the same thing. A lot of doctors are like, hey, if I could just walk out and just quickly in 30 seconds say, this is what happened in the encounter. But what is required in all three cases is a system that already knows the patient too. Because if someone talks to me and I'm the intern and someone else is the attending physician, they say, hey, make sure this is a note. I also know about the patient. So I can contextualize that information in the context of the whole patient. So at PIECE, we solve the comprehension problem first, which is PIECE also knows about the patient. but it couldn't listen to you. What people have been asking for, what they want, is kind of like pieces in your pocket, right? So I want to show you this.
Hey Pieces, the Echo just came back with newly depressed EF and new regional wall motion abnormalities. I placed a consult to cardiology to assess the patient.
Ladies and gentlemen, pieces in your pocket. We're super excited. Now, what I'm really excited about here is this is just the beginning, because this is the beginning of Pieces becoming an assistant. So the way that we're approaching it is, first, when we've worked hard on comprehension. So when you're talking to Pieces saying, hey, make sure I'm doing this or that, it knows about the patient. It's already fully aware because it's done a summary. It's also read through the whole record. If on the ambulatory side, when you have the ambulatory summary, it knows about the ambulatory. So it's understanding why you want the echogram in the context of the patient. The second is that you need summarization, because what Pieces will do is you've said all this stuff, and it's repeating back to you the key points, which is essentially a summary. These are the key elements. Because of the inpatient progress note doing inline editing, it can take those key points and bring it inline into the progress note. So when you show up in Epic, or you show up in your EHR, those additions are there from your comments. So if you're a surgeon or a hospitalist, case manager, you've told Pieces, this is what I want, it shows up, you can review the key points or not, it can immediately emerge. But when you show up for your note, it's already written in the context of the patient. That's what I would do with an intern. That's what I would do with a junior resident, right? But then you can imagine kind of the next step, which we're not offering here, but it's laying the foundation. So if you recall from our approach of how you explore the advancements, the next step would be, and if the echo result is back, put the echo result in, right? Which is now taking workload off. I'm spending less time in the EHR, and it's going to be higher quality. If the skilled nursing facility situation is resolved, put that in there, right? So now the discharge barriers becomes much more contextualized. It's also going to help Pieces on things like our predicted discharge date, which is a predictive model that's trying to predict when the patient's going to go. I just got real-time information from the doctor about this person's status. It's going to go into that predictive model. So what we're laying here as the foundation is the ability to start. Oh, and then the last thing about Pieces is you can have a running conversation with Pieces all day. So let's say that I saw the patient in the morning. I said, you know what, I'm going to have to get an MRI on this patient. I'm going to have to do this. And I dictate. I say that to Pieces. It'll store that. It'll integrate in your note. But if like an hour later, I saw a colleague and said, hey, the MRI came back as this, I can say, hey, by the way, the MRI came back as this. We'll do this. And it'll automatically do it. So a running conversation, which is what you want with an assistant, that's what we're doing with Pieces in your pocket. So super excited about this announcement. So really, I wanted to kind of end there and just talk about just putting this again in context of where we're going. So we talked about the Pieces patient briefing. To step back 1 second, we do think that the speaking modality speaking and listening modality is really critical. There's been incredible progress in the AI world of text to voice. So we do think that eventually Pieces gets a voice. So you could say, here's what I thought, and it could confirm. So these are one building block after another, so confirm. But we also think because it knows the summary, and for our health systems that are rolling out the patient briefing, this first starts off as a third grade, fifth grade summary to the patient, but you could imagine voice communication being really effective for patients where they don't want to read and may not be able to read stuff. The nursing summary in Q3, the ambulatory summary in late Q3, you're going to start seeing in our predictive models more large language model enhancement, so the performance of these models are improving. The agency component, which is to start talking about what tiny steps these models can do. the working progress note available now for any of the health systems that are fully deployed on an enterprise basis, and you can choose between just putting out the capture diagnosis, which is the first early step, or the full progress note. And then we will be releasing Pieces in Your Pocket in late Q2, early Q3, so we'd love to know which health systems might be interested. You do need to put the inpatient progress note and be on enterprise for that. So really excited, and that was it. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Ruben. Whew. Okay, we are at the end of our day one. I want to end with a little appreciation and gratitude because as a technologist and just sort of working in engineering in the background, it's hard to get a good vantage point and to see all these different angles, especially from the hospitalists themselves. So thank you very much. I feel a new sense of kind of inspiration and, I don't know, excitement about what I do each day. So with that, we're going to have a little happy hour right now. Please, just have fun. And Ruben forgot to say one thing.
I'm sorry. Thank you for the reminder. But Josh, we got you up here, so that's great. So, I just wanted to I forgot to see the cue, but this, I feel like I work with the best team on earth. And this wouldn't be possible with the incredible Pieces of employees. Some are remote. It's been an insane journey. The team has gone through fire and ice, and they know exactly what I'm talking about. Clinicians, engineers, AI, data scientists. There's been a lot of hard days, and it's been really incredible, and I'm just so grateful for you guys. It's amazing. Thank you guys to the Pieces team. And there's two other groups. We've been really blessed with incredible investors. They're all here today. They've also been through fire and ice. So they've been incredibly supportive and visionaries. Like most investors would not stick around for how long this has taken. You guys saw the 7-year odyssey to the summary and then to 2.5 million. Incredibly grateful to our investors. They're all here. They're amazing people, and would not be able to do it without them. And then we do want to thank the health systems. We really mean it sincerely that this is the health systems product. I mean, we can sound intelligent up here, but the amount of lessons we've got, like, Ruben, what the hell are you doing? Do this, right? You got the resounding messages we heard shape the product, and we hope that you'll feel that that's part of, we really want your input. There's some incredible thoughts, and we want the roadmap that Pieces builds to really be a health system roadmap. So thank you guys. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Yeah.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you very much. Again, there's demo sessions. We're going to do it all again tomorrow, but only for a half day, though, so you guys can get out early. Thank you very much. And, mingle around the back, drinks and everything. And make sure you get your parking revalidated, too. There'll be people out front. There was a little snafu there. Thank you very much.